preference is to the chat. My gender pronoun is she or her. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. When relationships don't always work out, be it that conflicts happen or there was misunderstandings, cutting people off exacerbates the situation where communication is closed off, blocking away any source of resolution or even the end conclusion to what the relationship is going to be about at the end of the day, right? Even if communication and interaction does not end well on our side, we said it is still going to be better than cutting people off because it provides the end mark of the relationship in a clear way and in a healthy manner. But also B, we provide the process of learning and maturing through the self-evaluation, which I'm going to prove in my speech, right? If we characterize to you what cutting off people looks like, we said it's the discarding of other individuals' existence, right? Which applies to all types of relationship, for example, romance relationship, friendship, family, and etc., right? Where the idea is imposed on every people to be interpreted and recognized. Cutting off people happens when conflict arises, meaning that people would block someone in social media or ignore someone deliberately after a certain problem happens towards their relationship, meaning that to clarify what cutting off means, so that it is something that is done deliberately by these people and not something that it is not an act that is driven through an unreasonable way, right? Two things I'm going to talk about in my speech. First, why cutting off people amplifies more problem inside the relationship itself, and second, about the importance of communication, right? But on the first argument on why cutting off people amplifies more problem, we say that conflicts in relationship is something that is very normal, right? There are no perfect relationships where fights don't occur. Therefore, we said when fights appear, it often happens under two reasons. First, under the heat of movement, and second, under misunderstandings, right? On the first reason, heat of the moment, where there are disagreements between one actor and another under the influence of anger, for example, people often are very irrational in these situations when they are in a process of fight with the people who they are in a relationship with, right? Driving them to the state where they fight with their significant other, family, and so on, where their words and actions are done through the heat of moment, driving to the conflict and potentially drifting it to a more serious manner, right? But on the second reason, we said that conflicts are usually caused by misunderstandings, where one issue is different in every people's eye. Misunderstanding in a relationship is something that is inevitable, right? For example, how parents think that playing gadgets is something that's not good, but their children insisted to play anyway, right? There are reasons behind why a certain statement is made by one party and another, but when people are fighting, they don't focus on the details of those specific words. Meaning that when there are good intentions for you to not do a certain thing, when the other actor doesn't understand the situation itself, is when misunderstanding happens, right? Instead of when conflicts happen, communication is very important to fix the problem itself. But communication is the key to a good relationship itself, right? Instead, if opposition wants to argue that people have their personal right to not interact with others, the same applies to other types of rights of these people, right? Which is to have the understanding, the full interpretation on why problems are perpetuated in the first place, right? However, what happens at their side is that when communication is cut off, there are no solutions to solve the problem itself, because the interaction between the conflicted actors are not being involved in a healthier way to solve the problem itself, right? And when this happens, it traps people under the face of anger and misunderstanding. Therefore, it has the likelihood of amplifying the problem even larger at the end of the day. When one tries to approach the other but was cut off, for example, problems won't be solved when the reasons behind the problem is unclear to one another. It creates a fracture. This is dangerous because it creates a fracture in the relationship itself. It is detrimental to sustain the relationship in a healthier manner. Even in their best case scenario, we said that when people have their rights and feel better when they cut other people's off, the disconnection between both parties are ended with a blind detachment itself, right? However, if we compare it with our worst case scenario, even if communication doesn't go well at the end of the day, however, exactly because you know what is well for both parties, there is a clear end at the there is a clear mark of the end of your relationship without like you blocking other people inside social media just because you're unhappy with them, for example, right? But on the second argument about the importance of communication, right? we say that whereas cutting people off does provide you the sense of relief. For example, the relief under their side is fake, as it only provides the short-term solution when people wants the disconnection temporarily, like running away from the issue, which only has a temporary solution, right? Because notice that even if you don't even if you got into a fight with a certain person, however, it doesn't just end right there, right? You still need to communicate with the others to know like what happens and the reasons behind why the problem exists in the first place, right? Which is why when problems occur, it is very important for you to communicate with one another. Two reasons why it is very important for communication to happen, right? First, we said it serves as a process of growing. It serves as a process of growing up, right? Because people notice how people tend to be selfish when they are in a conflict itself, right? They only interpret things based on their own perspective and don't try to understand the situation from a third perspective or the perspective of the conflicted actor with themselves, right? When there are no communication, we said it's going to be very harmful as it drives their relationship into a toxic relationship, right? The likelihood exists exactly because when closing people off, which is what happens under their side, becomes a habituation to not face a certain problem rather than to properly communicate with other. What happens then is the relationship is going to be toxic, right? Because when there is a problem, you don't communicate with your significant other, for example. Rather, you just run away and cut them off, blocking any ways of them approaching you or you approaching them, right? However, we said that these type of problems can only be resolved through the accepting of issues in a healthier way, right? And not immediately cutting off people when the problem is there to even begin with, right? In our best case scenario, where relationships can be mended slowly when you try to communicate and put into effort of solving the issue itself. But even in our worst case scenario, we said it's still going to be better, right? Because even if the communication thing doesn't work out, at the very least, there was a clear end to the relationship. There's a more mature way of ending a problem. The second reason of why it is important, because we have a preemptive mechanism of self-evaluation, right? Because notice how when cutting people off is something that's normalized, it becomes the possibilities of the same thing to happen again with like other people in other relationships happens as well, right? Where self-evaluation only happens when we don't close people off. People can't, because notice how people can't just self-evaluate by themselves, right? They need in our party to actually solve the problem itself, which is why we're so proud to propose.
Okay, I thank you for that fine speech. Now I call upon the leader of opposition. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
I will wait a minute. I will set my time and arrange my notes.
Sure, take your time.
Okay. 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 Wait, Kak, sebentar. Okay. Am I audible? Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before we go, before we jump into my argument or my rebuttals, I would like to frame this debate into 3 things, right? In a relationship, we say that not all individuals are not ready to explain the barrier in the relationship, for example, because in am I audible?
Sorry, like my Wi-Fi is quite unstable. You can just restart. Okay. From the beginning. So sorry, everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we think that we think that not all the people who are in relationship are ready to communicate or even express their feeling about the barrier in the relationship, for example, because not all individuals are the same, and not all individuals are ready to express them feeling in the communication. In the case of people pleasure, for example, people who can easily feel bad when they express something to their couple, for example, the idea of breaking up to end up the relationship with breaking up with a communication, for example, is less likely to happen to this individual, like people pleaser, because they cannot easily communicate it, right? So that's why we think that the burden of opposition is not to prove that the cutting off is the best way to end up the relation at the whole, right? But the burden of opposition is to prove that the cutting off is exactly okay for those people who are difficult to express their feeling, like people pleasure, for example, who always feel bad or always feel bad to express themselves, or even they always think what the couple feel after they say something, right? We think that we will talk about that, right? But second, we need to frame the debate, right? We say that cutting off is the easiest way to end up the relationship for those people who cannot easily communicate it, right? We said that we're not going to we said that cutting off is not always you're going to block someone and not communicating at all, right? It can also happen in the case when you block someone, for example, but you will just you just give time for the people to realize their feeling. So that's why we think that the idea of self-evaluation will most likely happen in our side, because we think that when we are mature enough, for example, when the people don't communicate with us any longer, they will understand that there is exactly something wrong with us, and we think that the self-evaluation is easy to happen, right? But thirdly, we say that the cutting off, meaning that you will not end up the communication, and it is good for two things, right? Number one, it is actually justified for two things, right? They must understand, your couple or your friend, for example, in toxic relationship, must understand that when you don't text them, for example, so you have no longer like feeling, for example, and you have something that you cannot solve with the communication. But secondly, the characteristic of those people who have been in relationship, for example, they have been mature enough to understand or even to analyze what is the lack or even the worst thing happens in the relationship, right? Our goal, why we need to propose the idea of cutting off, right? Our goal is simple. We want to avoid the unpleasant feeling or a toxic relationship with someone who you don't want to be with anymore, right? Because sometimes it's very difficult for those people who have who have like a feeling, like a bad feeling, for example, like perasaan gak enak, for example, for someone who you with, right? So that's why it's difficult for people pleaser or even introvert to communicate with their couple, just because like there is a domination, for example, happen in the domination happen, for example, in the result, and so on and so forth, right? But two things I'm going to talk, several rebuttals will be integrated in my speech, right? Two things I'm going to talk in my speech, right? We're going to talk why it is okay for us. Then we're going to prove to you why is toxic relationship is bad, and cutting off is one of the best way for particular person to do, right? But lastly, how effective is cutting off for the people pleaser, and how effective it is to end up the relationship. We say that uh, in a relationship that consists of two individuals, there is always be different ideas, right? There will always be different interests. In many cases, one individual has role to pay the bill, for example, or even in a particular relationship, you will always find someone who have a very bad temper, for example, and have very bad temper, and when you say something, for example, they have the tendency to be angry, or even to do something, to do violence, for example, to you, right? It goes to the it brings to effect, right? It will bring the idea of compatibility, right? When you have someone, when you need to deal with a childish friend or lover, for example, you will never be pleasant with the with them, right? And even the idea of happiness is not going to reach. And in the toxic relationship, for example, the domination is always happen, right? When in a relationship there is someone who have a second rule, for example, and the first rule will always have the tendency to push you or even to force you to do something, right? And we think that the most rational way for this the particular person like people pleaser, for example, is to escape from the toxic relationship by cut off, right? So that's why we think that the best way to end up the relationship is by cutting off for this typical person. But how it will be effective to end up the relationship or even to give self evaluation for those people, right? We say that the depressed, we say that the typical of one individual will always feel depressed to express simply because they put people interest or even they feel about the comfortability of your lover when you say something, for example. So in the end of the day, it will lead to the extent where those people who always have the second rule in the relationship, for example, will always be the one to be harmed, right? This is why we think that the idea of communication, good communication, or even provide healthy manner is not going to happen, right? Because one individual will always dominate the communication, and it will not end well, right? But how it's going to be good, right? Firstly, it will decrease the depress or even the burden of one party, right? But secondly, how it's going to give self evaluation for the people. We say that when someone who suddenly disappear from your life, when someone is disappear from your life, you will always have the evaluation, right? You will always have the thought, why is this people leaving me, for example. Within that, it will effective to give a self evaluation, right? Because you always analyze what is wrong with you, and even you will flashback the chat or even what is wrong with the communication, right? That's why we proudly oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now I call upon Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Okay, gender preference is she or her. If there's any POI, you can just unmuting yourself. Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I will start with 2 clarifications and discussing about issues that happen in this debate. So the first clarification is about people pleaser is a different case actually in this debate, because we believe that even if oppositions that they tend to cut off these people due to not avoiding any people pleaser actions, it doesn't mean that you are pleasing that people on our side, right? We believe so because if you just follow them on Instagram, actually, for example, and communicate with them as necessarily without pressures, therefore we believe that it is different with something you call people pleaser, because people pleaser, we believe that it's the moment you grant all of their demands, right? With a comparatively on their side, all we want is how we accept the problem, how we overcome the problem with the right solutions that I'm going to explain on my case later. So even if a people pleaser happen in this debate, we believe that it has happened toxically under their side. The moment they just cutting off the people, the moment they are actually become selfish, these people are become selfish due to accept or due to gaining any attention from other people, that they are actually strong, but in fact they are actually not that just avoiding their cases. Okay, and the second clarification is about just because we oppose cutting people off doesn't mean that we are forcing people to communicate all the time. In this case, where people to accept, they would still block other people under their side. So which means that we actually see that, which is why toxic relationship is magnified under their side, because the moment they are just become the moment that they are forcing the people to communicate, even in the best case of oppositions, that these people are not are problematic with you, but in the same time, there are forces or there are stigma that happen on oppositions on how do people to overcome certain issues. Okay, so I'm going to respond on their case on the issues of different interests and stigma. First response, we agree that with the situations of false portrayals and toxic stigma that exists in the status quo, but opposition is being overgeneralized without explaining to me the likelihood of it, right? On how you can just portray other people, on how this false stigma actually happen only under the basis of there's no cutting off that exists in the status quo. So we believe that second response on the government bench, even if the stigma is still happen and it is exists, but it will not be effective solutions just because you are cutting off these people off. Under the reasons of no explanations of and the natural solutions for both parties that came under the oppositions, and we believe that on our side, there's once they are having a good communications on what is the best for both parties, even if in the worst case of us that the communications doesn't work well or doesn't end well, but at the very least we have tried. And what that is the kind of stigma that we want to that we plan in the mindset of the people. The moment you have to try at the very least, and what is the result, it depends on the other. It depends what it means to be. Comparatively, under the opposition side, the people will just solve the problem based on their perspective, based on that kind of false portrayal. For example, like I have a problem with African American, therefore I have a false mindset on how African American is always being rude, right? Therefore, we believe that this kind of subjectivity or bias, it is toxically happen under their side. The moment these people will not just listen to other people, and the moment people will just denial on how this false portrayal actually have to be away from that. And we believe that the different interests and stigma will just toxically happen under their side. So what I'm going to explain to you is how cutting off it creates a false escapism for these people. 3 layers of analysis. First, about how the importance of communications itself. We mechanize communications as something crucial to decide what's best for 2 parties that are agreed by both actors. This is why in the context of business appointments, you have to bargain and explain your purpose to reach a certain deal. And in the context of love relationship, you have to be transparent with your lover. You have to have a good communications to making a clear decisions on how you make what you make this kind of family you want to have, right? Hence, communications is the only thing that can help you to survive as a social being. Whereas in the end of the day, you are going to meet unfacing people anyway, right? Even if in the another case that you have to meet another people, you start a new chapter in your life. But in the end, you have to have certain cope up mechanism on how you have to face. In the worst case, they overcome the same overcome. So on the second layer, I'm going to explain our preventive actions from government side. We see that communications without any cutting off leads to a preventive actions, and preventive actions means if there's an unpredictable cases where you have to meet the same person to cooperate with, then we say that this individual is more likely to get away from the trauma and hatred, and it can be in the best case that we can get along with them. Not even no, we don't say that, or we don't force these people have to get along with them completely, but in the end of the day, at least we can make sure that they have to be professionals. We can make sure that they have their end goal will not be disturbed with any kind of previous stigma. We believe that if you meet the same person that you hate or give you trauma is unpredictable or inevitable cases, right? Due to uncertain reason or accident. Therefore, the only healthy solutions we got is to face this kind of problem through the right preventive actions. My likelihood of these preventive actions is by the unpredictable cases I've explained to you, and also by giving yourself a self-healing, become someone mature. To be mature, you don't have run from the troubles, but instead you have to deal with it. So we say under those reasons, opposing cutting off is a good preventive actions. Comparatively, under the side, the moment they just prioritize how the giving a false or short-term comfortable that came from the oppositions, let me say that this is false, because comfortable comes when you overcome a problem. You will finally release once you overcome the problem, and you know what is actually happened actually happens, and what is actually the root of the problem. And we believe that it is more likely to happen if there's a good communications to begin with, and you don't have, even if you have to roll down your ego, but at the very least, if the fruit will be sweet. Comparatively, under the side, they would just they will just have a short-term process that actually they believe. And then lastly, how the false escapism that portrayed under their side. Frankly speaking, the more you try to forget, the more you will remember, right? We believe that what is meant to be happen is for the sake of betterment, even if it leads to a failure, but it teaches you to be better next time and always strive for the best and prioritize the process. Comparatively, under the oppositions, the moment they validate this kind of cutting off, then it leads to a false sense of escapism and solutions due to your validating the sense of denial and run from the problem. This is harmful. Why? Because in the worst case that you have to be problematic with 10 people in your life, then you have to be feel suffer trauma and have to forget them 10 times in your life. And it is not easy, right? Life should move on. And once you have to this 10 times of problematic, then you have to stop your life. Then you have to quit your, or even quit your life in the best case, just this 10 times, and it is not worth it. It's not worth it, and it drags your mental health, and you will be less likely to accept people in your life due to avoiding conflicts. Although we believe that conflict is inevitable, therefore, the moment you just run away from it, you will never free. You will never free and trapped under the toxic awareness, and it is not fair for the other people who wants to get having a good intention in your life. And we believe that under those reasons, the false escapism came from the oppositions. Thank you.
I thank you for that speech. Now I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, let me set my timer first. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The idea of the short-term feeling that coming from government is not right? Because if you keep spending time with the toxic people that hurting you, then the moment when you make your feeling or yourself become more and more trauma, the moment when you cut them off, it is the moment, the best decision that you have in your life, because you make the short time with that person. You don't make a lot of memories that they say that it's hard for you to forget them and blah, blah. Exactly in your side of the house, when you keep being with that person, when you don't cut them off, you make the more memories with that person, the more you hurt yourself, right? They also talk about the selfishness, right? We say it is not selfish when you cut them off people. It is self-love, right? Because you understand that those people are actually don't want to communicate with you, right? Those people are actually doesn't work when you communicate with them, right? They keep hurting you. They keep actually being really not supportive in your life, right? It is really self-love when you are trying to not communicate or cut them off, because they are just not the kind of person that you can talk with, right? Because they are not in line with your purpose of life. So then why you have to think about themselves when you are hurting yourself in the same time, right? I want to begin my speech by saying that the more people that you let in your life, the more pain that you will get, right? The less people that you let to enter your life, the less pain that you will get at the end of the day. This is why the cutting off. The idea of cutting off is exactly should not be opposed in the first place, because by controlling people that coming into your life means that you're going to make a healthy life, healthy environment, healthy mental, and even will be easier for you to achieve your dream in the future, right? We say it is not okay for you to convince yourself that you will be able to solve all problems with only communication. Sometimes communication will only work if both parties want that. You don't have to force yourself like you are the responsible if you're feeling hurting, because those kind of people don't like communication. They like to hurt you, right? We say the idea of mature will be in our side of the house that I will explain you later. And the more problem that the argument from government that say it create more problem, exactly they are the one who create more problem, because you keep maintaining people stay in your life, which is they don't like you, they don't support you, they are being toxic, then you are the one who create the more problem, like, right? We say that we are not the kind of person that run away. We understand that we run away because we understand that communication doesn't work. They don't actually brings the benefit in your life, right? And the idea of cutting off exists in our society because people already progressive enough. People understand that sometimes you are just not switched to certain people. You are just not switched to certain people, right? In order to avoid chaos among many people, in order to avoid more problem, better for you to cutting off them, trying to convince yourself that those people will treat you better someday, will even hurting you because you're hoping something that will not happen at the end of the day. And sometimes sometimes the existence of some people in your life make you sad. The moment when you broke up with your boyfriend, for example, you decided to block them, and we think that it is healthy, because if you still be a friend with them in social media, you will keep stalking him and crying because he has new girlfriend, because you still have feeling for him, right? It is hard for you to move on from him, right? So cutting off him is the best way that you can do in order to forget him, and even in order to forgive all his mistakes, right? We don't think cutting off we don't think that we have to oppose the idea of cutting off, because we think that by cutting off certain people in your life, especially the toxic one, is actually better for your mental health. Because if you don't feel safe or comfortable being friends on social media, then why with those people, then why you have to stay be friend with them? Because you are being fake and hiding your emotion. Again, you are hurting yourself, right? Why we think that cutting off is healthy? Because first, cutting off people means or determine that you are wise enough to selected which people that can enter your life, right? Because if you keep certain bad people in your life, it will harm you. It even will harm your progressivity, because people who don't like you will not support you at all, even will destroy your life at the end of the day, right? By cutting off certain people means that you are going to maintain a healthy environment, because healthy environment will affect your mental health. Healthy environment will even make you healthy physically and even mentally, right? Why cutting off is justified? Because first, cutting off is the best way to stay away from the people that you don't like. You have to be you have the moral responsibility to keep your life happy, because you cannot enjoy your life or express your life on social media if you're still afraid that some people will judge you, right? Most of the time, people being depressed because they stay close with the toxic friends that actually ruin their life, right? What is the comparison? If you oppose the idea of the cutting off, or if you are voting for the startup house, means that you're going to let all people into your life and let more people hurting you and destroy your dream, make you depressed, and even lead you to the unhealthy and unsafe environment, because you don't like them, right? You understand that communication doesn't work, so why then you still in this kind of relationship, right? We don't want that happen in every individual, because every individual deserve to cut off toxic people in their life, because it is their right, it is their life, it is their choices, right? What do you get in our startup house? By cutting off certain people, the idea of happiness, satisfaction, comfortability, and safety will be only achieved in our startup house by every individuals, because cutting off people will only, because by cutting off those people will on, because by only this proposal, you will only let the supportive and positive and lovely people in your life, right? No more jealousy Karen that slowly but sure destroy your life purpose, right? The comparison is this: like in their startup house, you only hoping and imagining that they will change, that communication will work, and at the same time you're hurting yourself. You sacrifice your time, energy, even your mental health to actually thinking that those people and hoping that they will change, or even communication will be better. In our startup house, what you get is that you will be stay away, no more problem, less mental health problem, that because you will stay away from those people. We said that it is morally justified for every individual to cutting off certain people in order to create a happy life. Thank you.
I thank you for that speech. Now I call upon Government Whip to hear.
My method is just to unmute yourself, and my favorite pronoun is she or her. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. What is the foundation of all relationship? It is love, it is trust. I believe it is communication. No one can become besties or lovers without communicating. Similarly, no one can cooperate well without communication. Communication do create conflict sometimes, but more importantly, it also creates mutual understanding, affection, trust, and reliance on each other. Almost every problem in our social interactions stems from or can be solved by communication. Breakups, fights and misunderstanding, which is why we oppose cutting off an act of deliberate no communication. Here's basically how the ARP approaches debate. Okay, let's be extremely narrow in this debate and not talk about everyone and just about people with communication problems. We said for a moment the ARP tried to take such a soft stance and just play in the case of someone who is bad at communication, they've already lost this debate. We said that this debate is not merely about people who are bad at communication, but about everyone when they face problems in a relationship. So proud to oppose. Several questions that you failed to answer in this debate. First, why is cutting off someone a relational decision and not something you do under the heat of a moment or avoidance of a problem? Second, why will cutting off people not make people who are bad at communication become even more worse at communication because they always avoid communicating with each other and end up not with no communication at all? One clarification before I enter my questions, right? We said that not cutting off with someone doesn't mean that you have to stay like in a relationship that you hate, right? It means that when you face conflict inside of a relationship, you can talk about with that person and actually clarify what is happening in that situation, right? Which means that it could either solve the problem and makes the relationship very smooth and not like what the opposition tried to frame it, which is like the communication is so bad and we're just gonna stay in a toxic relationship. But second, even if we like fail in communication, the communication doesn't end up well. We said that for the very least, we already make it clear, which means we make a clear cut and no thank you, clear cut and at the end of a clear cut and towards such a relationship, leaving no like unresolvable not scars where you always think about your ex because it doesn't make it clear that you already don't like him because you're just gonna keep thinking about relationship because you never talk to God and keep it to yourself exactly because you believe that you're not done solving problem by talking out. That even if on our side of the house and worst case it doesn't work, at the very best we already speak it out and we leave no nonsense scars at all and we can avoid the debate. So yes, what's the PI?
Yeah, don't you think that for some people communication is actually the one that can hurt them because the more they talk to that person, the more they feel the pain because those person sometimes hurting them.
We said that exactly from the moment we meet with someone that actually create hurt for us inside of a communication, we have to speak up even more. Second, because from the moment you do not speak up with that person is just going to become more arrogant and more complicit on the fact that, oh, you're not going to speak up and just going to bully you even more and speak even more harsh word. Because nothing is in a real life world where even if you do cut off someone, that doesn't mean you can stop interacting for someone. For example, if you're actually meeting with a bully in your class, you cannot just completely cut off from that person, right? I mean that you will have to still face that person. But from the moment you actually stand up and say, I do not like you and I do not like the way you talk to me, that person will realize that, oh, this person is not a person that I can easily bully, or for example, try to like do bad things inside of a relationship, right? So that at the end of the day, inside of a relationship, if you want to solve a problem, you have to communicate and say out what you think, right? Only when you make your firm stance, only make you yourself as someone that is not allowed to be bullied, for example, and good at communication, will someone not actually take a soft stance on you. But two questions on this debate, right? First, does cutting off effectively solve a relationship or give a good end to a relationship? Let's engage with the ARP's biggest premise, right? That not everyone is a good communicator. Several responses to this. Yes, we acknowledge not everyone is a good communicator, but at the same time, not everyone is born as a good communicator. Communication is also a skill. When you use cutting off as a means to end a relationship, you indulge in your inability to communicate, making communication an even bigger barrier for you actually to cross, right? For example, you talk with your friends and because you can't communicate properly and can try to like convince them, you stop communicating. So this is not a solution to a problem, or this is an avoidance of a problem. For someone who can communicate, we said that cutting off is an even more toxic way to solve the problem. Second, because you cannot communicate, you stop communicating, right? Meaning that you'll never ever learn to communicate, right? And not communicating is never a forever choice. When you meet with problems that you have to solve and that you have communicated, then you're just gonna stop there and become extremely unable to actually do anything at all, right? Increase your habituation to not communicate. Meaning that in the ARP, people who can communicate will always stay the same because every time they meet with conflict, they'll just stop communicating and shut themselves in their own world and close out everything, right? Second, notice that not every relationship can end easily by cutting out, right? It's not as easy as all try to frame, which is like the easiest way to stop a communication is just like a relationship is just to stop communicating, and then people will realize that something is wrong and they'll evaluate themselves, right? So that not everyone is like that kind, right? This is an extremely bad narrative inside a relationship where you think of something and expect someone to do something as what you think they will do. For example, I just be silent and I expect all my friends will suddenly understand why am I sad and doesn't explain to them, right? We believe that we're all human, right? Human cannot read your mind. They cannot read what you think and what you want. Only when you speak out and say that I want you guys to come for me and I'm actually feeling extremely bad, but how you communicate to me, but how you treat me, will your, for example, with others or friends understand what you truly want and realize that, oh, they're actually doing something extremely bad that makes you feel bad and self-evaluate. And even if they do not like try to self-evaluate on the arts of the house, we will say at the end of the day, if you already speak up and if they do not try to change, then you can immediately say that this is not a relationship what I want, and you will actually go out of this relationship. But on this side of the house, when they actually stay silent, first of all, in their best case, even if people like try to comfort you, but at the end of the day, it's not always that the case in every single time, right? But second, on your worst case, when people do not try to understand you and you just shut up that person, mean that this relationship can never be maintained, because you never try to explain what you want, what you think, and what is actually something that makes you feel bad in the first place. Meaning that on your side of the house, people will always be stuck in a toxic relationship and a toxic relationship. Meaning that on your side of the house, they are not going to have a good relationship at all, exactly because they never try to solve the problem. But third, even in their basket, it does provide a sense of relief. We say that it does not solve any problem and make the problem clear, meaning that the problem will always continue to stay. Meaning that something that will like keep thinking about their act will actually be more likely to happen on their side of the house, exactly because people always stay silent and end a relationship with no full stop, meaning that they'll most likely live an emotional scar or comparison or regrets. In a comparison or side of the house, we try to reconcile the relationship to become even more better using communication. But even if it does not work, we said this is much more better exactly because it provides a self-evaluation for others for at the same time ourselves, right? This leads to me my second passage where who can actually create a self-development and maturity. With that on their side of the house, they're going to create a habituation to flee from problems, which is not going to happen on our side of the house, because even if the communication fails, said for the very least, it makes the other realize that they are actually doing something bad and we're unhappy, and we can immediately stop this relationship because we're then making it clear to us them and they do not change at all, right? But second, it also creates a self-evaluation where we understand that on our side of the house, we not only need to stay like on our perspective where we think we're completely right, but also put in other people's perspective, meaning that only on our side of the house can we reach this self-development and maturity, and that's why we're so proud to propose.
Okay, I thank you for that speech. For output, wait a second, yeah. Okay, I thank you for that speech. Now I call upon opposition reply. Here.
I'm starting my speech in 3, 3, 2, 1. Why we should win this debate? Because first, they say communication will actually solve the problem. We say no, communication, the result of the communication, when you fail with communicate with that person, will hurting you even more because you give more time, more memory, more hope, and even more chance for them to actually hurting you, right? We say the communication will not working in their side of the house because the more you spend time with that person, with that toxic person, the more you will be hurting, right? We prefer not giving them the same chance and even not talking to them anymore because we understand our own need as the person. For example, like introvert person just don't like to talk. We understand our need in the first place. We understand that we will be hurt even if we talk to them more, right? We prefer not to hurting ourselves more, right? Doesn't mean that we are going to run away from them. No, even we are actually the one who actually prevent the chaos among the people because we don't want the more problem happen, because the more communication happen, the more arguing and the more anything that you talk with that person, right? Enough is enough. If you understand that that is the toxic relationship, you have to move on, right? Secondly, they never rebut our case of the toxic relationship on how we have to stay away from the toxic friend, on how we're actually the wise enough when we decided to cut off some people in our life because some people just doesn't suit to our purpose in the first place. We don't even, they never rebut the idea of the less progressivity of on how these people are actually make our life less progressive because they don't like us, for example. We don't have to stay with them anymore, right? Secondly, we brings the idea of controlling people who can enter your life by cutting off some people, so there will be less people who hurting you. For example, like we controlling people, right? We controlling some people that actually not to enter our life. That means that you are actually prevent yourself from the people who are going to hurting you, right? In their side of the house, if you let all people, if you don't cut some people, or if you don't cut people at all, means that means that there will be more people who hurting you, because there will be more people in your life. But if you prefer, in our setup house, when we cutting off people, means that we are going, the people who hurting us, there will be less people who hurting us in the first place, because we block them out, right? There, we don't give those people chance to actually hurting ourselves, because we prevent we prevent the mental health problem that we just never rebut by the government, right? My first and second speakers also talk about this self-reflection, comfortability, and feeling safe. Again, they never rebut our argument by saying that comfortability and feeling safe. They never rebut this kind of thing. So that's why we should win this debate, right? We also talk about the selected people that should enter our life in the first place. They never rebut that also, right? We actually why then we have to win this debate? Because actually they are the one who create more problem, because they give more chance, more memory, more time for the people. Even you know those people are actually toxic. You understand that those people are not going to work at the end of the day with you. Even you know that those people are actually will hurting you more, because the characteristic of some people, they just cannot stand for you, right? Better for you to actually cutting off them in order to achieve the happiness, the comfortability, the safetyness, and even prevent the mental health problem in the first place, right? We believe that we should win this debate because we already explained the whole things in this debate to you. Thank you.
Okay, I thank you for that speech. Now to close off the debate, I call upon government replies. Here.
Okay, I believe that I'm audible right now. So without further ado, I'll just to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. When cutting off people harms both party, which is you and which is yourself and other people, that is why when the idea should be opposed. So opposition failed to understand two things. First, when one opposes the idea of cutting off, doesn't mean we are going to force them to communicate with the others, whether not to only run away from the core of the problem, but to solve it and face it, due to having a clear explanations and to giving self reflections. B, as cutting off is not equal to separation to a toxic relationship, but it means to separation. So the comparisons on the debate should be then about becomes whether you should suddenly disappear or you speak up and break the relationship due to giving yourself betterment. So two tipping points why we as the government side should win this debate. First, on the idea of cutting off. First layer about resolving the issues. When communications is the key to healthy relationship, we utilize the communication to solve the issue. It is crucial to let people know whether or not the relationship is sustainable. Then there needs to have a clear definitions of the issue itself to be assessed among both sides. So the best case of our side is when the relationship works out, gradually mending the problem with resolutions in a proper way to make it clear with the problem and this problem solving. Meanwhile, our worst case, even if the communications doesn't work that well it doesn't end that well, it is still better because we have a clear remarks on how the relationship ends, as well as to open up the chance to self-evaluations on how you react to the problem next time. On our side, instead of blaming the problem that exists in the status quo and neglect it, we prefer to utilize the positivity due to the self-betterment. So oppositions try to cope up with the benefit by saying that self-evaluations exist under their side, but we say that when you got a cut off without no reasons at all, especially in the case of toxic relationship, what happens is no self-evaluations rather than self-blame. And even if they want to try this for the self-evaluation's sake, from the moment of silence, this is a late case from the whip without further explanations of the harm or benefit and the aftermath. So we believe that it will not become as a case. So second layer is about the alternative. Our stance is not to run from the problem, but to face it. By facing it, it leads to a coping up mechanisms once you met the same person or different person, but in the end, you will not be overshadowed by the trauma and hurts. We say that our cope up mechanism is a good alternative due to ensure that the individuals are not being controlled by the problem. Instead, you are control of the situations. And we say that it is effective due to cut off the hatred from the root instead of leaving the scar to wound and act like nothing happened. So in the case of effectivity that came from opposition should be run under our side first. And what we we got from the opposition is to become they become dismissive, especially under the basis of self-love. The self-love case will not be fly in this debate under the reasons there's no likelihood, and they are trapped under the best case scenario since the beginning due to overgeneralize the people that are cutting off that cutting off is that the problematic with you. In fact, there are so many alternatives to create self-love, and we believe that self-love should be started with yourself without interfering of the people that came and go in your life. So our tipping point of the government case is there's no healthy alternative, and instead there's no any solutions that came from the oppositions due to self-betterment for these people. And lastly, about regrets, the layers about regrets. We believe that suffer from trauma is happen because you blindly fall in a relationship. Life is not going to move on when the people are trapped under the vulnerable state of constant and regret. Therefore, we believe that by this vulnerability, we want to take this possibility, just like I've explained before, on how you have to face the problem. Also, looking back at the situations, what if you communicate with your significant other and not just shutting yourself out? The fact that you are stuck in the loop of regressions and is why happiness is not going to exist under their side. To conclude, opposition left nothing unless regret. So we believe that on the second point about the toxic relationship or about false escapism, we believe that conflict is inevitable. Therefore, the moment you just run away from it, you will never free and trapped under the toxic awareness, and it is not fair for the other people who wants to help you or get in your life under the good basis. So in the conclusions on oppositions, these individuals are having a false escapism, such as denial, traumatize, or even blame the others of the actions without necessarily reflect themselves. Even if we bite the bullet that on our side without the cutting off, it's like you don't get the same revenge or actions you required to satisfy you. On our side, at the very least, we have an inclusive problem solving and preventive actions by communications to solve it, which is through by communications and engagement. The issue will be clear, and the problem solving is for the sake of the two parties. Thank you.
Polio. Thank you so much everyone for the debate. Quite interesting topic. So gonna structure my oral adjudication into two parts: first decision and secondly the justification. Now, let's just get right into it. For decision, I gave the winning eventually towards government bench. The reasoning as follows. So basically in this debate, I used two metric on the topic of the justification of cutting off, and then how either opposing or supporting the idea of cutting off will manifest in several impacts. First, on the justification of cutting off. Government bench enters the debate by saying that cutting off is not something that is justified because first, conflict is something that is normal within any type of relationship, and then people tend to be irrational during the conflict, and then oftentimes the conflict happens due to misunderstanding, and then it only requires communication in order to solve the problem and then fix the relationship at the end of the day. While cutting people off, you're just gonna trap yourself in and the other person in the realm of anger, and then hence amplify the problem even further at the end of the day. Hence, this is not something that is healthy. Now, to this, opposition tried to counter the idea by arguing that cutting people off is something that is justified because first, there are a lot of people that has a hard time to communicate their feelings towards their partner. Maybe just people pleaser. They do like have different personalities. They might be just an introvert that don't like talking about their feelings. And then they also talk about like cutting people off is something that is justified within like toxic relationship. Because sometimes you are stuck within a dynamic where you don't have a symmetric power with your partner. Hence, even if you communicate your feelings, it will fail because they will not listen to you because their intention has always been about hurting you. Now, in this point, I think both sides of the house provided us with like a quite brilliant ideas. But the way that I weigh it is that I gave the point towards the government side of the house because I think they managed to first point out that the entire case coming from opposition is contingent upon these people only continuously stays within the toxic relationship and not ending the relationship, while the point of not cutting people off is not necessarily not ending the relationship, but just like trying to communicate and fixing things instead at the end of the day. And then secondly, they also managed to broaden the justification on a more moderate and general ideas in comparison to like opposition side of the house. And I think that there are some level of analysis that tries to argue why this analysis and why the more general ideas is something that is more important in comparison to like opposition's analysis regarding toxic relationship. Hence, the tipping point lies on the government side of the house. Now, secondly, on the name of impact, the first idea of the discussion is regarding self-evaluation. Government side of the house brings the idea that communication is key because you need to self-evaluate. You need to be able to grow from the conflicts since it's something that is happening quite a lot. And the only way for you to be able to learn from it is by not cutting people off and by communicating with others. And like really discuss what is the root of the problem at the end of the day. Now, opposition tries to rebut this by saying that uh, self-evaluation is not contingent upon not cutting people off, because when you cut someone off, then first you acknowledge your own feelings and you become wise and you manage to identify your own needs and wants. But secondly, the one that's being cut off will realize that they did something wrong because they are being cut off. Now, eventually, though opposition did bring like good ideas, this also goes to government side of the house, because they managed to point out that first, human beings, we cannot read other people's minds. Hence, in order for you to truly self-evaluate, you need to be able to know what is the real problem, and this necessitates the other party to be able to communicate that with you. And like the act of cutting off is just gonna block the entirety of thing at the end of the day. And due to the absence of like process analysis coming from opposition side of the house on how like just being cut off means that you will self-reflect and not instead blame the other partner, just like how governments try to analyze how it's more likely. At the end of the day, I could not really give it towards the opposition side of the house. Now, on the idea of false escapism and like the importance of communication, government side of the house brings to the bench that it's necessary for you to not cut people off, because cutting people off is just an act of like false escapism, because the relief is going to be momentarily and you're not going to be able to like really solve the problem. Hence, you're still going to be weighed down by it continuously. Now, opposition tried to argue by saying that this is not a false escapism, because the moment that you decide to cut someone off, then it means that you already know that your life is going to be better without them. And then this is not going to be momentarily because you cut off something that is toxic out of your life at the end of the day. And just sometimes like keep being selective of like who you invite into your life will minimize the pain that you experience at the end of the day. Now, I think again, like unfortunately, the point also goes to government side of the house, because they managed to describe that how the problem is not going to end right there. Because even if you cut off the communication with that person, then you would still has the possibility to encounter that person, and it's important for you to be able to communicate your feelings and just like stand up for yourself in order to make the person realizes that they don't have that much power over you to bully over you and like to trample over you as an individual. Hence, like most likely you're gonna have a better outcome on the long run, instead of just like shutting down at the end of the day. I get that opposition tried to argue why like in like there are cases where people just don't want to listen and their intention is just to want to hurt you, but then like unfortunately there's no analysis why this is like the more likely case at the end of the day in opposition side of the house. Now, on the idea of safety and healing, on the importance of communication, I think the reason why also I give this tipping point towards the government side of the house is because they managed to expand the benefit towards a more general case in comparison to the opposition side of the house. And they also managed to analyze why training yourself to be able to communicate properly through not cutting people off and being more quote unquote confrontational is good, because every single thing that you're going to do in your life is going to be dependent on your ability to communicate with other people, especially when humans are like a human a social creature. Hence, like this is a much more important benefit. While this absent the analysis of like why just like cutting people off is fine, even if it on the cost of like not being able to learn how to communicate, which is to some extent opposition conceded, is more important or was absent. Hence, the point also goes to the government. Now, on the idea of safety and healing, I think opposition side of the house brought up a good idea regarding that how safety for like a lot of people is important and only can be achieved through cutting people off, because sometimes people are just that harmful towards these individuals. Hence, like this is something an alternative that is valid. Government side of the house again try to argue why like there's still a likelihood where you can end the relationship without cutting them off, and just like communicating your feelings without jeopardizing your position inside the relationship. I think this point was quite deadlock eventually, because there's no side of the house that tries to argue like the likelihood of scenarios, like which one is more important, which benefit is more important, who are like the more vulnerable actors in here at the end of the day. But since like government side of the house has managed to like win a quite substantial amount of tipping points, and those are quite important because they managed to expand their impact first, and secondly they managed to justify it. At the end of the day, the win still goes to government side of the house. So that's my oral adjudication. If you have questions, you can reach me through WhatsApp, or even like right now, it's also fine. Yep. Thank you, everyone.